really straight with my thoughts here. We're continuing a series simply called Signs. It's a series that I kind of started on Easter Sunday, if you remember, and I made a little reflection point that I would love to actually talk a little bit more about this. And so we all kind of came back and said, let's do this. Let's spend a little bit more time on this thing. And so last week what we did is we just laid the introduction, just a foundation of what signs are. We're talking about miracles. And then miracles are still to accompany the church of today. Amen? They're not just for the first century church, but they're for us today. And they give us the power and the authority to go out and live the Great Commission. Because that's what we're all called to do, is to walk the Great Commission out. And so we've made some notes along the way here that the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John do something very interesting in the original language. Is they don't really use the word power or miracles. They really use this word signs. Because the sign was not just the miracle that took place for that moment, but it was a sign to point to something else that was going to happen. And so all of these miracles that we're going to look at, they all are a sign to help us today direct our path on where to go. And so Jesus, when he exercised his power, right, the natural byproduct of every time his power was done was signs and wonders and miracles and the miraculous took place. That's what happened. And so we need to know when we ask for the power of God to show up in our church and we ask for the power of God to show up in our lives, the natural byproduct of that, just like it was with Jesus, should be with us, should be signs, wonders, miracles. Amen? It should be the natural part of that outflows out of the power of God. And so when you say, God, fill me with your power, fill me with your strength, let's see him. These are the things that should just naturally take place. And when we have the power of God all over us, two things should happen, right? The first thing, it should impact the things that we say. And what we say is important. God will guide and direct the way that you talk to people about your faith, the way you share your faith, the way you're directed in these things. So that's an important thing. But it'll also affect what we do. Okay, so it's not just about the words that we say, even though the words that we say are important. Sometimes we need to go an extra level to the things that we do, and so that there's signs and wonders accompany the words that we say. So we're not just talking about how good and how powerful God is. We're actually walking out so people can see how good and powerful God is, because he works in the supernatural and he intervenes in our daily lives and he does miraculous things. If you're a believer in Christ and you're in this place today, you've already experienced the greatest miracle of all, that's salvation. If you don't believe in miracles, then you can't be saved, because salvation in itself was the sign of being a miracle of what takes place. And so this is what we know. Through the book of Acts, we see Jesus commission his disciples, and his disciples took his words very serious. And when they went out and they preached the good news, signs and wonders and miracles, they accompanied the work of the early church. Over 25 times in the book of Acts alone, do we see other people, right, believers of Jesus, not just, the Gospels share a lot of stories about Jesus doing miracles. The book of Acts now shows 25 independent stories about followers of Jesus who took the Great Commission and said, okay, Jesus, I saw Jesus do these miracles. He told us we could do them, and we see all these occasions where miracles are walked out in people's lives. And so in these Gospels, in Mark and John, specifically John, we are called to walk these out in our life, and they should be a sign to others that God is still on the move. And so that's really where John's Gospel focuses all of its attention. John, he witnessed the supernatural, and then he was able to walk in the supernatural. So, the Gospel of John was written, it's the latest of all the Gospel writings. John lived to an old age. A lot of the other early disciples, apostles, they lived much younger. They were martyred. They were killed. The Apostle John, we know that he was kind of on this prison camp, right? Patmos, and he did a lot of his writing there. And so he wrote the Gospel of John probably some 60 years after the death and the resurrection of Jesus. And so as John is writing his Gospel, can you imagine John at an old age, and he wants to make sure that the things that he shares are the most important things, right? He's seen it all. He's seen the early church, and he's like, I don't want the church to miss anything. And so he brings these validations of these miracles that are taking place, and it's kind of his way of saying, please don't miss the sign. I'm writing these things so that you understand that you too get to walk in the power of God. And this is his letter to us. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, how do we see this story carrying on? Well, it's simple as this. we say, God, would you allow us to speak through your Holy Spirit, and would you allow us to act through your Holy Spirit? Amen? And when we see those things take place, we're going to see incredible things taking place in our life. And so this concept of signs is really the backbone of the Gospel of John. So this is what I want you to do today. I want you to turn to the Gospel of John. We're going to spend most of our time, matter of fact, we're going to spend the next several weeks in the Gospel of John, because this is what John does. He outlines 7 miracles. He chose 7 miracles to tell the story of it. So we're going to walk through these 7 miracles, and we'll maybe do one a week, and maybe some of the weeks we might hit a couple of them. But this is what he does. He outlines these 7 miracles, and we have to understand why John did this. And we find out why John just chose these 7 at the very end of his gospel. So we're going to jump up to chapter 2 for our lesson this morning, but I'm just going to read quickly. John chapter 20, this is the second to last chapter in his gospel. He explains why he did what he did. Okay, it says this. Jesus performed many other what? Signs, okay? He did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. So he says, listen, I could write book after book, volume after volume after volume after volume, tell you all the miracles that Jesus did. The other Gospels actually share more miracles, but this is what John says. But these, the selection, the 7 that I have written to you about, so that you may believe. That you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have eternal life in his name. So I have specifically picked just 7 of the tons of miracles that he did. And the reason I've chosen these 7 is so you may believe. John is in his old age at this point, and he's saying, I got to get you to understand this. And so he writes these things. So John is not about the volume of the miracles. He's about the validity of the miracles. And so this is what he does in John chapter 2 to set the stage. So the first miracle is in John chapter 2, and I'm going to read the end of the story here to help us understand of what John's trying to convey here. So John chapter 2, verse 11 says this. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed. So Jesus is trying to reveal something through these miracles. He's not just meeting the moment of that issue going on, but these are a sign to teach us something else. And so these signs were done so that he might reveal his glory and his disciples would believe in him. So you with me? So this is the point of John. So what did he try to reveal through his gospel and through telling these 7 miracles? Well, the first is to prove that Jesus is the Messiah, so that you may believe that he is the Messiah, he is the Son of God. The second is to bring people to faith. I'm writing these not just to give you a historical narrative of this person named Jesus. I'm telling you who he is so that you may believe in him. So that you can have hope in him and to reveal Jesus' glory, okay, of who he was. And this is what, so the first miracle does a lot about revealing the glory of God. It's really the main topic through the Gospel of John. And so as we look deeper into these, I kind of noticed 4 things that all of these miracles have in common. I want you to write these 4 things down. And over the next several weeks, we're going to talk about how all these things happen. The first thing is there's a purpose. There's a purpose of the miracle, okay? Each miracle points to a particular aspect of how God sets himself above humanity. Okay, so it shows his supernatural power. He can do things that no man can do. They're only under the control of God. And so he wants to tell you there's a purpose behind these miracles. The second purpose, and the second thought of this is the person of miracles. Okay? John is writing these miracles so that we can know the person of the miracle. You with me? The reason he wrote these is to teach us about Jesus. Jesus is the person of the miracles. As a matter of fact, in the 7 miracles we're going to look at, only one other person is mentioned by name, right? So he kind of tells these stories, and only out of those 7, one time he mentions someone's name of who he's doing the miracle for in these stories. And so his main objective is simply to teach us about who Jesus is, that he is the Son of God. As a matter of fact, in 3 of these miracles, he makes his statement of deity, I am. How many of you guys know that God says this, I am, right? That I am, because I am this and I am this. So we're going to look at some of those. And John wants us to help us understand that Jesus is the main character. Okay? He is the main character. Though the miracles are taking place to other people, Jesus is the main character of these miracles, and he is what we're going to point to. But then he also talks about the people of the miracle. So there's the person who's Jesus, and then how many know you need a person to see a miracle come through? So there's the person, then there's the people of the miracle that takes place. And so obviously, if you had a problem, you needed a miracle. So there was these people who came onto the ground here and just see what was taking place. And so what John does is he's like one of those great videographers of like a live sporting event or a live event. He kind of takes these snapshots of what's going on. So the camera doesn't always just focus on Jesus. It often pans. You guys have watched, like, if you watch like a great baseball game or a basketball game, what do they show the events that are taking place, right? But then what do they do in those really critical moments of going on? They go to the shot of the people praying, the ladies crying, hoping, covering your eyes, what's going to take place. So John does a great job of storytelling and helping us realizing all the people that are surrounding these miracles. He paints the picture of what's taking place. And so he does a great job with this, and he helps us. And then you obviously have the problem of the miracles. If you don't have a problem, you don't need a miracle, right? So if you have a problem in the house here today, I have good news for you. You're right in line for a miracle. Because these people had a problem, which put them in the perfect place for God to intervene in their life. It set them up for a miracle. If you don't have a problem, you don't need a miracle. If you have a problem, you're right in line. You set yourself up for a perfect place for God to work supernaturally in your life. So you might have come in here today a little overwhelmed, a little stressed out, said, I got a problem, Pastor John. Guess what that puts you in store for? A miracle. And so don't take it for granted what God wants to do in your life. All right, we're ready to jump into our first miracle we're going to look at. John chapter 2, verse 1 through 3. It says this. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Let me give you just a little historical narrative of what's taking place here. So they're in a little town called Cana of Galilee. This is kind of like the sister town to Nazareth. And so the only thing I can think of is these towns, they must be like rivals or something like that, because when, like, I grew up, I went to Ramacle High School, it's in Franklin Lake, and our rival was Indian Hills High School, right? And so we didn't like them, they were no good. And the only reason we can kind of figure out that these two cities must be rivals is because we only really know the story of one person from Cana. It's this man named Nathaniel. And you might wonder who Nathaniel is. Well, we know him in all the other Gospels as Bartholomew. He's a disciple of Jesus. And you remember when Philip wanted to introduce Nathaniel or Bartholomew to Jesus and said, we know who the Son of God is. And he says, who is he? Well, he's Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathaniel says, well, what good has ever come out of Nazareth, right? So there's a rivalry going on there. He says, I'm from Cana, so we know he's from Cana, and they don't think too highly of the people from Nazareth. So they're rivals here. But Jesus is in Cana, and this is where this miracle, and actually the second miracle, takes place. So there's a crisis that's taking place. They're in the third day of the wedding. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And all of a sudden, what takes place? They run out of wine. This is a problem in their day and age. So Jesus' mother steps into the scene, and I don't know why they ran out of wine. I don't know if it was poor planning. I don't know if they had wedding crashers. I didn't know if they just didn't have enough money for all the wine. Maybe, how many of you guys have ever been to a party where all of a sudden they're starting to run out of food, and maybe you're hosting a party and you're like, oh no. We had an awesome men's breakfast yesterday for all you guys who were there, and I think we had like 70 or 80 more people show up than who signed up for it, which was awesome. And then all of a sudden they said, oh no, load up half of your plate. Don't do the whole thing. Load up half. We want to make sure everyone has enough food, right? So we made sure that everybody got to eat. But you get to this place, and so here they're running out of wine. And so Jesus' mother thinks of a great solution. She gives us some answers to some solutions to our problems. The first one is she goes to Jesus first with the problem. How many know that's a good way to start, right? What does Mary do? She goes to Jesus. And so we have to understand this. The feast of a wedding in Jesus' day and age probably would have taken place over like 5 to 6 days. This was a big, huge event. The story tells us that they're already on the third day of the wedding, right? So there's this celebration. All these families invited. They're enjoying the festivities of what's taking place. And so halfway through the wedding feast, they're out of wine. So they didn't just have to finish the party off. They needed enough wine to get through the next couple of days. Obviously, they didn't plan out And so the wedding host, they would have been ashamed. They would have been a bit embarrassed of what's going on. So Mary does the second thing. She goes to the one who can do the impossible. Right? There's a problem. She knows of someone who can fix the problem. So she goes to the person who can solve the problem and goes to the one who can do the impossible. And this is what I think. I think so often when we are faced with a problem in our life, we go to everyone and we go to everything else first. Right? How many of you have been there? I've been there before. Oh, let me go solve this way. Let me go to this person. Let me go to this. And oftentimes we miss the point that the first person we ought to go to is the person that can make the possible out of the impossible. And this is what Mary does. So she goes to Jesus first, and then she goes, let me go to the person who can do the impossible. And all of a sudden things begin to take place. And this is Jesus' reply in verse 4. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not come. Now, hard to believe, this summer, next month, hard to believe, both myself and Susie were turning 40 this summer, right? And we've been married for 17 years. If you put our time we've been dating, I've known Susie for over 20 years. And if I ever said, woman, why do you involve me? My time has not come. It's not time to do the dishes, woman. The time is not. How many know that would put me in the doghouse pretty bad, right? Listen, all of you guys on Mother's Day, and maybe for some of you guys that are dating, you're not there yet, let me give you some advice. This is not a great way to start off a relationship, okay? So we don't want to go there. So you wonder, what's going on here? So Jesus kind of stops his mom in the tracks. Now, to help you understand this a little bit better, the first century culture, we actually see this throughout the Gospels. We see Jesus use this in other terms of speaking to women. It's actually just a term of endearment. It simply means ma'am or mother, or it doesn't mean with the way we think it means this, but I couldn't help but read that and say, I can't believe he just said that to his mom. If I would have said that to my mom when I was growing up, I would have had a slap right across the face, right? We didn't talk to my mom that way. So he's actually just giving her honor, but more importantly, we have to read the second part of the phrase, because that's the important part of this. He says, my hour or my time has not come. How many know that Jesus had an appointed day and hour that he was supposed to be revealed as the Messiah? So Mary comes to him and says, listen, we got a problem. They ran out of wine. You can do something about this problem. And he says, listen, I'm not sure. This is not my time. Remember, so in John chapter 17, you can read this later on, Jesus says a prayer. He says, Lord, Father, allow me to be glorified now so that you may be glorified. Now is the time of glorification. Then we see the triumphal entry take place, right? Remember the triumphal entry when Jesus is coming down? Because this is the appointed hour that the people would now recognize Jesus as the Messiah. He's fulfilled the prophetic word. And they come to the disciples, they come to Jesus and say, stop these people. They are proclaiming you to be Messiah. What does Jesus say? Hey, even if they are quiet, the rocks are going to cry out, because this is the day, this is the hour of proclamation. You with me? So what Jesus is saying, it's not the time quite yet, but Mary's a mom. And how many know your moms are great? You all know how to get to us kids, right? When mom asks for something, how many times do you just do what mom asks you to do, right? And so you get it done. So we see this. So his mother makes a request. This is good advice for all of us men here today. Let's do what our moms tell us to do, right? And then we'll see something come through. All right, verse 8. Here's what it says. His mother said to the servant, do whatever he tells you. That's some good advice right there. His mother says, I think we should take this advice. When someone tells us, do what Jesus tells you to do, it's probably good advice, right? And so Mary said, listen, trust me on this one. When this man speaks, do what he tells you to do. And here's a little lesson for us. Are we doing in our life what God has told us to do? Are we walking this thing out? So this is what Jesus said. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding, these are large containers, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, and so they filled them to where? To the brim. Right? Then he told them, now draw out some and take it to the master of the banquet. So they did. So they followed the instructions of Jesus. So when we need divine intervention, we call on Jesus. If you need divine intervention, do what he tells you to do. Because this sounded crazy at the moment to them. Okay? You want us to do what? And so oftentimes, let me help you out with this. Jesus does things a little different than the way we want to see them happen. If you need a miracle in your life and you're expecting God to fulfill it one way, you should probably be looking in a different direction because he's probably going to do it different than you would think he'd want to do it. Okay? So this is the story here. So whatever brings the most glory of God, that's what Jesus is going to do. And so this is basically what he said. See those bathtubs over there. Okay? And I have a picture. Put this picture up there for me of what this looked like. Okay? This is what Jesus is referring to. He says, so these large jars were bathing vessels used for ceremonial cleansing. So a wedding was a very festive, but it was a holy celebration. And so you would have these ceremonial cleansing baths to go into. So people would come into this place. Before they would enter into the wedding, they would wash their hands. They would wash their feet. You with me? They would prepare themselves through a ceremonial cleansing, and they would use these basic bathtubs to accomplish cleansing, okay? So is this helping you paint the picture on what's taking place here? So the people had already come into this. The party's been going on for 3 days. So this water inside of this is now dirty, okay? This is what they came. They cleansed themselves with it. They cleaned it. They would have been required to enter into the wedding. And so Jesus says, do this. You know those dirty bathtubs over there? Go add some water to them. Let's fill those things up. Let's try this. And can you imagine these people? It's like, you want us to do what? You know, like, so they go and they begin to bring gallon after gallon after gallon to fill up these bathing vessels, these jars, to be used for this miracle. Okay, so here's a little lesson from us. Jesus can take what is used and dirty and make it better and new. Jesus can take what is used and dirty, and he can make it better and new. Right? And so we watch this thing go on here. Verse 6 says, how much wine would Jesus begin to bring forth? So if we have 6 of these, they hold 20 to 30 gallons of water apiece. We're talking about 120 to 180 gallons of wine. How many know there's a lot of wine, right? There's a lot of wine going on here. And how many of you guys know this is not the first time that we have seen God transform water into something else? Stick with me here. Don't miss what I'm going to talk to you about. We saw this in the Old Testament, right? In the Exodus, God spoke down the Nile, which was water, and it became blood.